Well, Customs and Border Patrol raided a California cannabis farm using Blackhawk helicopters in Ventura County, which is just north of Los Angeles. And people are outraged over it. Watch this.
Protesters who have showed up to vehemently protest what's going on here. And just in the last few minutes, Customs and Border Patrol helicopter has entered the scene here. They are landing in the middle of the farm as we speak. It does appear that they were not planning to be here as long as they have been. And so this helicopter that you're looking at here, guys, apparently just made a run over to Van Nuys Airport for some cases of water, which is what they're bringing into the scene here. So there are a whole team of ICE agents at the farm. There are other agents down there as well as the National Guard police standing guard and protecting Laguna Road as this enforcement action takes place right here, going into hour number 4 this afternoon. Again, a major situation transpiring here in Camarillo, and it does not appear that they were intending to stay this long.
Yeah. Okay, so what people are most upset about are the scenes of children running and crying and people being hit with tear gas. Watch this.
Do not panic, do not run! Do not run! Stay calm! They took your mom?
Okay, so you can see the kids running. The one boy on the phone was crying after his mother was taken by ICE. However, others are pointing out that the real question here is, why were these kids running in the first place? Why were they on the farm? Are they child laborers? Why are the farms hiring children? And who gets punished, the people or the farm owners? That's a big question. A lot of these people are being carted off potentially to really dangerous places. They're the ones suffering the consequences. But what about the farm owners for even hiring illegal or undocumented or unauthorized, however you want to characterize it, which we're going to get into later on here in this segment? But who actually gets punished? Why is it the people? What about the farm owners who are hiring these people? It seems like they would be the first people that should go down. That is who you'd go after. Well, California Border Patrol Commissioner Rodney Scott said in a tweet, quote, "Here's some breaking news. 10 juveniles were found at this marijuana facility, all illegal aliens, 8 of them unaccompanied. It's now under investigation for child labor violations. This is Newsom's California," he says, which I don't think this is just Newsom's California. I think this is happening all over the country. And a big question is, were these children trafficked in for labor? Are they part of the missing children? Here's Trump talking about those 300,000 missing kids who entered the country only to disappear without a trace.
And you know, something that you should have that you haven't reported. As you know, 300,000 children are missing, right? 300,000 under Biden. We've already gotten back 10,000 of those children, and we have a lot more planned to come back. We're getting them back by the thousands, but 300,000, and we've, as of this morning, over 10,000 we've gotten back.
Okay, so a few assessments on this. First of all, these people weren't gangbangers overrunning apartment buildings, as you saw. They were women, children, and men working on a farm. I get it. It was a cannabis farm. It wasn't like this was the farm that was growing our strawberries or some other of our produce, but still, I think tear gas and Black Hawk helicopters is way, way, way out of line. And what is going to happen to that kid's mother? Is she going to be shipped off to Alligator Alcatraz or Guantanamo Bay? Trump has plans to ship off 30,000 people to Guantanamo. This is from Politico. This was about a month ago, so this should already be happening. The Trump administration is planning to dramatically ramp up sending undocumented migrants to Guantanamo Bay starting this week, with at least 9,000 people being vetted for transfer, according to documents obtained by Politico. That would be an exponential increase from the roughly 500 migrants who have been held for short periods at the base since February, and a major step toward realizing a plan President Donald Trump announced in January to use the facility to hold as many as 30,000 migrants. And again, that was about a month ago. So if it was, they were reporting a month ago, he's going to start using it this week. Well, that was a couple of weeks ago, which, by the way, sending them to Guantanamo isn't just about what they deserve because they shouldn't have been here. It costs us taxpayers a lot of money. In fact, it costs us $100,000 per day per person, according to Reuters, to keep them in Guantanamo. I mean, think about that. Do the math there. So Trump plans to send 30,000 people, with the average stay being 30,000, the average stay being 100,000 per day. That is, do the math, 30,000 people times the average stay is about 20. It's actually, some of the reports say the average stay is about 37 days, but we're just going to go with the low number of 20 because some say 2 weeks, some say 37. So I'm averaging it out to 20. Okay. So 30,000 people times 20 average days times $100,000 per day. Do you know how much that is? $60 billion. $60 billion, which is maybe why at this point they've only sent 500 people, which is $1 billion already. That's $1 billion for the 500 people that they've sent to Guantanamo. And so what we now know with the reporting is he said he was going to send 30,000, but now it's only been 500. And I think this is why they shifted instead to Alligator Alcatraz, which is the nickname for the immigration detention facility in the Florida Everglades. The center is surrounded by alligator and python infested waters. And people are saying that they're being held in completely inhumane conditions. One person says, they're not respecting our human rights. We're human beings. We're not dogs. We're like rats in an experiment. Another said, I don't know their motive for doing this. It's a form of torture. A lot of us have our residency documents and we don't understand why we're here, he added. A third detainee who said he's Colombian described deteriorating mental health and lack of access to necessary medical care, saying, I'm on the edge of losing my mind. I've gone 3 days without taking my medicine. It's impossible to sleep with this white light that's on all day. He also claimed the Bible was confiscated from him. He says, they took the Bible I had. They said there's no right to religion. And my Bible is the one thing that keeps my faith. And now I'm losing my faith. Remember, these are Christians, right? People from South America are typically Christian. So people that are like, well, the Muslims, they're so different from us. Well, these are often Christians. So I think a big question is all of this overkill? Are illegals really illegals? Are they criminals? We see these types of memes a lot. Here's a meme, this illegals aren't immigrants, they're criminals. So the question we're going to answer tonight is it a crime to be in the United States undocumented, as the left says, or illegally, as the right says? And the answer is no, actually. Simply being in the United States without proper documents is actually not a federal crime, which then begs the question, why are these people being sent off to Alligator Alcatraz or Guantanamo Bay or the CCOT Center in El Salvador? There's a lot of questions. Now, some of them are criminals. Some of them have committed rapes and murders. They're gangbangers. They're, intimidating people at those apartment complexes, telling them to pay up to their gang or else. And those people absolutely deserve to be shipped off to Alligator Alcatraz and held because they're actual criminals. But what about the people that were working on the farm? The moms that were there with their kids? Their kids definitely should not have been there. Child labor laws, we have those in the United States, protection for children. But should that mom, or should, the young man who's come here to work at the farm, should they be treated in such a way as criminals that they should be going off to Guantanamo Bay? It's one thing to get them out of our country, fine. You want to deport them? Sure. But should they be sent to Alligator Alcatraz? Should they be sent to the CCOT Center in El Salvador? Should they be tear gassed and rounded up with Blackhawk helicopters? And I think that's a good question we should be asking, especially when we understand that it is not actually a federal crime to be undocumented. But I'm going to share with you the right word. I don't think undocumented is the right word. I also don't think illegal is the right word. I believe we should be neutral and fair and legal in how we describe these people. And I'm going to say that they are unauthorized, and that is different. So here's how U.S. law works on the issue. Merely being present in the U.S. without legal status is a civil violation, not a criminal offense. This means the government can start removal, which is deportation proceedings, and may impose fines, but cannot charge someone with with a crime just for being here unauthorized or undocumented. I would call it unauthorized. I think that is the right term for this. And obviously it wouldn't be illegal because it's actually not illegal to be here. It's not an actual crime. Now, you could want it to be a crime. You could want them to change those laws, but it's just not right now. So it is what it is. They're just unauthorized. Entering the US without inspection, however, which is crossing the border at a place not designated by immigration officers, or in other words, you might say crossing the border illegally, is a misdemeanor for a first offense, just a misdemeanor. This is a criminal act, but it only applies to the act of entering. It actually doesn't apply to simply being present in the country. So people who enter the US legally, like with a visa, but then they stay after their visa expires, are actually not committing a crime at all. They didn't cross the border illegally without proper inspection. They went through with proper inspection. They came legally, and it turns out being here without that authorization is not actually a crime. Overstaying your visa is a civil infraction. It's not a criminal one. So to say illegals are criminal is actually not accurate at all. Unauthorized, they're unauthorized. That's accurate. They could have committed a crime when they crossed the border illegally. That would, without the proper inspection, that would be an illegal act, but a misdemeanor only. So the question, so then that, look, if it's a misdemeanor for them to have crossed over the border for the first offense, if you do it again, it's more of a felony offense if you do it twice. But if you do it the first time, it's a misdemeanor. And if you've overstayed your visa or you're on a student visa and they don't like that you've protested on behalf of Palestine, why then are we tear gassing these people, rounding them up and throwing them into Alligator Alcatraz or even to Guantanamo Bay? Seems like there would be a better way to do this for those who are not the gangbangers who are holding up apartment complexes or raping people or killing people. Seems like there's a better, more humane way to do this. I'm not saying they should stay. I'm not saying, oh, have a heart, they're just seeking a better life and, kind of all of that. No, I'm not saying that at all. But I'm also not saying send the Blackhawk helicopters after them. Send the tear gas after them, shoot them up. That just seems to be going a bit too far for an offense that our own country deemed to be a misdemeanor if it's a crime, larger crime. Well, it's a crime if someone has been previously deported or removed from the US and then they re-enter without permission. So this is a felony and that can result in imprisonment. So you have to have done it twice for, I think, the action to result in detention to the level that they're being detained. But then again, you think, but Guantanamo, we're not sending our child molesters. We didn't send a single person from the Epstein list to Guantanamo. And if anybody deserved to be there, don't you think it would have been them? But we're not sending any of those people to Guantanamo. We're not sending them to Alligator Alcatraz. So if they are coming across the border twice, look, we treat rapists kinder than this. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying, yeah, let's just leave them be. And they're just seeking a better life and all these things. No, I think everybody needs to be documented and authorized. And I'm fine with deportation, but deport them. Don't send them off to Guantanamo and Alligator Alcatraz. Don't tear gas the people. Just round them up and deport them and be humane about them. Let them contact their family. Let them make sure they have proper belongings and a cell phone to, and some money in their pocket, that they're their own money. I'm not saying give them money, but I'm just saying we've heard stories of deportation proceedings, and they basically make the person sit in a cell for hours on end, days on end, and then they ship them off, and they don't give them any of these basic things that you would hope that somebody would get if you were going to send them back to their home country. Just basic humane procedures and procedures that would cost a lot less than $100,000 a day. What is also illegal is, and what you could say somebody's a criminal, is actions like making false statements to immigration officials. So if you lie to them, that is considered a crime. If you commit fraud or like you enter into a sham marriage for immigration purposes, those would be all considered criminal acts. So most of these undocumented or illegal immigrants, however you want to frame it, they're actually not criminals under federal law just for being present in the United States. They may face civil penalties and deportation, but they shouldn't be facing criminal treatment solely for their unauthorized status. And I think unauthorized is the correct term to be using. Criminal charges only apply in very specific circumstances, such as illegal entry, which is a misdemeanor, and then illegal re-entry after removal, which would then be a felony or fraud. So, like I said, it's more appropriate, I think, to call these people unauthorized rather than using these really highly inflamed terms like illegals and criminals, and rather than just kind of shrugging it off like it's no big deal and calling them just undocumented. That is not accurate either. I think somebody that's undocumented, if you're going to use that term, is more like if you were to have a baby at home, and you didn't ever go to the doctor, because you don't have to. I mean, you can get pregnant. I mean, there's teenage girls that do this, right? They hide their pregnancies. They never go to the doctor. So you could be somebody from, Midwest, Oklahoma, teenage girl, and you don't want anybody to know you got knocked up, and you never went to the doctors, you never went to the hospital, and you had a home birth. That baby is undocumented. That is what I would call an undocumented person that then would need documentation. Liberals use that as you're just undocumented if you came across the border and you're here working and seeking a better life. No, that person's actually unauthorized. A baby that's born here in the United States that had a home birth and they never actually documented the birth or the existence of this human being, I wouldn't say that they were unauthorized. They're authorized to be here. They're American citizens. They're just undocumented. So I think it's appropriate and important we use the right terms so that we can then have a civil discussion about what to do about it. And I know that the left likes to say undocumented. I know the right likes to say illegal, and these are just political terms. But again, the appropriate term is unauthorized. And then we could say, okay, what do we do about these unauthorized people? And do unauthorized people that commit trespassing, should they be sent off to Guantanamo? Should they be sent off to Alligator Alcatraz? Should they be sent off to El Salvador? What should we do about these unauthorized people who have not committed an actual crime? Should they be rounded up with Blackhawk helicopters and tear gassed and shipped off to these crazy detention centers? I don't think they should, in my opinion, unless they are the gangbangers who are going after the apartment blocks and taking over our cities and causing violence and committing actual crimes. I don't think anybody deserves to be shipped off to Alligator Alcatraz. And the other thing to think about is, if they're going to ship off people who've committed trespassing or misdemeanors or civil offenses to places like Alligator Alcatraz, you might be for that right now because you're like, yeah, get rid of the illegals. And you might be thinking they're illegals when they're actually technically not illegals. They're just unauthorized. And you might be championing this on. But you have to remember, if they're able to do this to groups of people who on American soil are afforded the American Constitution, that's how it works. Our Constitution works for anybody standing on American soil for the most part. How else are they going to use this? If they're able to use this for civil offenses and non-criminal acts or misdemeanors, who are they going to go after next? Because you might be fine with it under the Trump administration going after the unauthorized people who are here in this country. But are you going to be okay when President Ocasio-Cortez gets in there and she decides that the people who are committing crimes are actually the MAGA Trump supporters? Trump can't be president anymore, but it doesn't matter. There's somebody else stepping in his shoes, and we still have to watch out for this white supremacy fascism in the country. Are you going to be, once these facilities are built, once this precedent is set, once we can ship off people for civil offenses and misdemeanors to Alligator Alcatraz, you literally could be next. So we always, I think, have to worry about the abuses of even a presidency we may support, even politicians we may support, because you always have to think ahead to the time when the person in power is not somebody you support and maybe somebody you are gravely afraid of. And what are they going to do when they have that same power? What sort of methods are they going to use? What sort of statutes and laws are they going to pull out of the books from 1800s Civil War era that they're going to suddenly break out and say, oh, well, now we get to round up anybody and everybody we believe is about to commit an act of civil war against the country? All the MAGA people, all the January 6 people, they deserve to go to Alligator Alcatraz. Do you think now that Alligator Alcatraz has been built, it's suddenly going to go away? Will it go away under President Ocasio-Cortez? No, of course it won't. And do you think she's going to be using Alligator Alcatraz for what she considers to be undocumented people who are just looking for a better life but are just undocumented in her eyes? No, she's not going to be using Alligator Alcatraz for undocumented people. She's going to be using it on you. That's who she's going to be using it on. So we always, always, always need to look at this and say, yeah, is this okay? Fine. I might be okay with it right now with what they're doing, even though I'm not. I'm actually not okay with them rounding up moms and people working on a farm who are not the gangbangers overrunning apartment complexes or who are out there committing, the MS-13 gangbangers. I'm not okay actually with people who have committed civil offenses and misdemeanors being rounded up with tear gas, Blackhawk helicopters, and sent off to Alligator Alcatraz. That doesn't sit well with me as an American. That is not the country that I believe that we should be living under. I don't agree with that. Fine, send off the MS-13 guys all day long. I'm fine with that, but not the mom working in the farm field. Even if it's a cannabis farm field, I don't care. I just don't think that is the appropriate way to handle this. And I think there's a better way. And I think that you probably could have just talked to the woman. Maybe she would have run, but how fast could she run? And you probably would have caught up to her. You didn't need to tear gas her. You didn't need to send the Black Hawk helicopters in or ship her off to some crazy detention facility in swampland, Florida. I just don't think we need to be doing that. Save that for the actual criminals. And by the way, we have enough American citizen criminals that we could be sending off to Alligator Alcatraz who are much more dangerous than somebody picking cannabis in Ventura County, California. But, I think our priorities are, we just need to get a hold of the priorities. And I'm not saying leave these people alone, let them be. No, I'm not saying that. Deport them. That's fine. Deport them, but do it humanely. That is what I'm supportive of, humane deportation and a pathway to come back when we realize we actually need all these people. Because I do think once we deport all of them, we're going to turn around and be like, well, it turns out we kind of need them. But we don't know how many we need until we actually deport everybody. And until we see when the jobs open up and farm owners aren't able to hire child laborers, and that they should be going to prison. You want to send somebody off to Alligator Alcatraz? How about the farm owner who hired the little kids and knew that they were hiring little undocumented kids, illegal kids, unauthorized kids, unaccompanied kids who've probably been trafficked in by coyotes, and they still put them on their farm to work. 8 out of 10 of those kids were unaccompanied, and they still hired them, and they had them working on their farm. I'm sorry, that's the person who deserves to go to Alligator Alcatraz. He's no different than a coyote smuggling people in. He's a trafficker, and that's the person who belongs there. But instead, we're going to send the woman who got trafficked in probably because the MS-13 gang where she's from said, we're going to kill all your children unless we ship you off to America and you have to go work in a cannabis field. And she says, okay, I guess I'm going to America to work in a cannabis field. And she ends up in Alligator Alcatraz. I don't think that's the person who belongs there. And I think that is the question we should be asking when we see these things and before we start cheering it on and championing it. Now, I understand why Trump is doing this. I do understand the logic. There is actually a logic behind these sort of insane scare tactics of, we are going to tear gas you, send in the Blackhawk helicopters, ICE agents are going to come blazing in, and we're going to send you off to Alligator Alcatraz. There is actually a method to this madness, and that is a scare tactic to get people to realize it's not safe to come to this country. You won't find work, it won't be good, and it won't end well. And that does deter. There's no doubt that that deters. But a lot of these people are here because they've been trafficked in. A lot of the women and children especially, and a lot of the men have been trafficked and used scare tactics of killing their family members or raping their daughters. And they have no choice but to come into the country and work on these farms for hardly anything while the cartels get all the money. And that is a different problem. We can't be punishing the people who are being trafficked in. We know we have a trafficking problem in the country. So I think we just have to look at this from a humane lens and a realistic lens and understand all of the moving pieces to this. I understand why they're doing it. I do think it probably works for deterrence for the certain group of people that come on their own accord. They might think twice now. I'm sure they are. But what are we doing about these cartels? What are we doing about the coyotes? What are we doing about the American companies who are hiring the trafficked people and utilizing that trafficked labor? What are we doing about that? These are questions that we should be answering. But certainly, I just don't think Alligator Alcatraz is the answer on this one. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.